Ladies and gentlemen, in celebration of this very magnificent Resplendent, I wanted to take a moment to give my best impressions. First of all, here's what the original sounds like.
Ah,
Ah, and
they never learn.
they never learn.
Let the lesson begin.
Alright guys, if you're still here after watching that intro, I commend you. But I do have a little bit of likeness for not only the voice actor of Lukas, but the actual character himself. For those of you that don't know, Valencia is my top 3 of favorite Fire Emblem games, and Lukas is pretty awesome in that game. So I'll do my due diligence here and provide you guys with a Lukas analysis. Before we jump into this video, a couple of things I actually want to remind you of. Treat these videos as an analysis of the character, despite Resplendent being in the game. A lot of people might think that 2 to all stats makes a significant difference in matchups or use of the character. In reality, that's not really the case. A lot of it comes down to just more execution, or proper support, or just investment and whatnot. So treat this as a Lukas analysis, but the Resplendent can be factored in for you guys to make use of him. And Lukas may surprise you by the end of this video as to being a bit better than maybe we gave him credit for. So yeah, here we are. This is Lukas, and of course he is gonna probably have new voice lines featuring Greg Chun, so I'm gonna kind of miss the old voice lines, but it doesn't affect me because A, I don't really use Lukas in any of my cores, and B, well, you can always just change back the old skin, or maybe you just don't have FET Pass. It's not really an option. Either way, this is a video dedicated to Lukas, where he stands in the current game, yes in 22, being a 2017 unit. And like I said, may surprise you what you learn by the end of this video. That's my intention as always, because of course I did some research and we found out where exactly or how I feel about Lukas in today's game. Alright folks, before we begin, smash a like button and sub. Seriously, as I mentioned every video, I notice those thumbs up, I notice actually quite a few subscribing, and that feedback that you give me in the comments section always helps to improve these videos in what ways I can. Despite what limited time I may have or the amount of hours I put into this, I do appreciate all of you, and you all do contribute in some manner. For those that really want to support the content I do, maybe consider the Patreon in the description below, or the YouTube join button, or come check me out on Twitch, and there's always Prime subs there if you're a Prime player. Alright guys, let's jump into this. So I'll begin this video by talking about Lukas's art here. And I believe this is the emblem attire, which really does fit him because he looks exactly as I would expect him to be, which is a guard. So somebody, he's pretty much the gatekeeper before gatekeeper happened, I guess. That's like the best way I could describe it without any sort of spoilers or anything. But the art does fit him and the style fits him just perfectly, in my opinion. Now, I'm not a big art critic, so I'm not going to sit here trying to describe the details, but I think it fits him pretty well, and that's generally my opinion on it. So yeah, nice art, and let's jump into some more details, more analysis. First of all, and this is probably going to be the biggest surprise to many of you, is I actually went to see how his stat spread holds up in today's game, and he's the 3rd highest defense of the lance infantries in the game, with only Dimitri and Dimitri either tying him or exceeding him. Now, if you factor in the Resplendent stats, it actually puts him at tied to the highest defense stats. But one thing that you probably didn't recognize is that Lukas has access to 20 flowers, so even without Resplendent, he's actually the highest defense Blue Lance infantry in this game. Which is, yeah, it was a bit of a shock to kind of go through this, but his stats spread has actually aged pretty well, because it's min-maxed in defense, and he still has a pretty solid base attack stat. So of course when you factor in the Resplendent stats, he ends up being pretty good, or just giving him 20 flowers, which again these guys don't have access to. So he's pretty cool in that respect. One other thing you'll notice is he actually has the highest HP of everyone here. So believe it or not, for a character who came in 2017, he was ahead of his time into putting points where it mattered. And giving him a Resplendent only makes him kind of just better at this role. Or maybe give him a bit of a variety in how you want to use him. Either way, as a character you might want to invest in, you probably won't be disappointed by how you use him. This is why someone like Arden is still so good, because he pretty much gave all of his attack points, or all of his stat allocations into HP, attack, and defense, and then dumps his like speed and res. But because of this like wonky stat allocation, he ends up being pretty good. And Lukas can kind of follow this logic in other ways, which of course we'll talk about. Again, if you missed it, here it is, just kind of zoomed in to the red areas there, min-maxing some pretty good stats and dumping the ones that won't really matter. But this is the beauty of it, and yeah, let's talk more into that. So if you wanted to know how I feel about Gregchon, here's I'm still not editing that one out, how I feel about Lukas. And yes, Gregchon is a pro of Lukas, of course, is the notes below. So yes, he doesn't have much of a player phase, and he is lacking in speed and res because of that min-maxing. But you'll probably realize quickly it's not as bad as it might look. For cons, they're not that bad. They can kind of be redeemed. And of course, the pros definitely outweigh the cons here when you use them correctly. So yeah, his stat spread, if I didn't already mention it, Resplendent only makes a lot of things better. And you might think low res is bad, but it's actually not. And the low speed, again, won't really matter. It's actually serviceable. So let's jump into some builds here, and I'll explain exactly why it's good. So you see on the far left, it is a standard tank with fire save combination. This actually takes away a lot of his issues involving res, since stuff that hits him in melee range will just end up being dragons. And the most common dragons you'll find are pretty much stuff like Sothis, who's pretty irrelevant, and Siros, who if you choose to use him on Anima or Astra, is going to probably be the thing that hits him the hardest out of most stuff. But because he's at infantry and has access to null follow-up, you're likely only taking a single hit there, and if you run null follow-up, he has enough speed to double her back and will likely kill her. So despite her maybe having like Dragon Wall, even through that he's going to fire off some pretty huge bonfires. The beauty of him is his preference weapon is still serviceable. It's actually very simple. It's just a slaying lance with sturdy stance on it, sturdy stance 2. So it's just attack and defense +4 with slaying. It's not as archaic as some of the older refines where they're much worse, but it's not terrible either, because slaying is something you likely want to use on most characters anyways. So slaying and some bonus on attack and defense is perfectly fine for him, since he has a good attack and defense stat as it is. Access to null follow-up really does help him quite a bit, as his speed stat is just good enough to likely double back the stuff that is much slower than him. If you wanted to, and a build I haven't shown here is a tank build that can actually speed stack him with the speed IV and potentially just running stuff like Kestrel Stance or Darting Breath. And that can help his matchups in different ways as well, since null follow-up lets him do that sort of thing. Depending on your mythics, depending on the support, making him speedy is actually fine, because he's going to be taking 0 damage from most physical threats as it is, and his attack stat is already good enough that with a bonfire, he's going to kill most things. So I really do think combining him with a far save tank is perfectly fine in today's game. He's just not going to take damage from most physical threats. They have to pretty much be running true damage to do much, and he has the color advantage against true damage type characters anyways, such as Brave Olm. Brave Olm's only going to be doing true damage to him in that case. If you ended up speed stacking Lukas, you could potentially outspeed Brave Olm as well. So it's not as hopeless as that might sound, and that's where he's likely going to take any of his damage. By running Guard Effect in the A, Sturdy Stance 3 or Kestrel Stance 3, you're going to make sure he doesn't take any Moonbows or Lunas that might not be pre-charged already, or you could be always running Even Pulse tie support to stop that sort of stuff. Either way, because he does have a slaying weapon, you could end up, again, speed stacking him for more of a Gale Force type role, and in that would be involving Wings of Mercy, Flashing Blade either in the Seal or in the A slot, Times Pulse, Infantry Pulse, you know, the same old kind of thing, but the fact that his weapon is slaying means that he just has a naturally higher attack in this role, and he could even use Heavy Blade instead of Flashing, so to potentially give that Flashing Blade to someone else. He's, again, okay in this role. I wouldn't necessarily put him there, but you could make him fit into some Wings of Mercy Gale Force strats, especially at a lower investment if you're not thinking of plus 10, plus 20ing him. This obviously is more dedicated, video in general, to Lukas fans. If you are a Lukas fan, then don't completely dismiss him, as he is going to be serviceable even before Resplendent, but Resplendent just puts him in the eyes of everyone as, oh, this character still exists. Yep. Finally, we do have an anti-Fallen Edel build. I love to do this, as it's always funny to see how 2017 or older units stack up to what is modern power creep. And yeah, so if you run no follow-up, obviously you can double back Fallen Edel. If you run Steady Breath, which you totally can, and Ruptured Sky, which is beast effective damage, which you see here is Fallen Edelgard gonna get completely demolished by 2 hits, with Ruptured Sky being one of the more powerful hits. He could even run Blue Flame, and he's gonna end up killing that way. So yeah. Again, in Arena, he's actually fine too, because he just has so much defense, and he'll likely take very little damage. Just to kind of even accelerate this point about Fallen Edel, I wanted to show you guys a matchup involving Lukas over here with max investment versus a Fallen Edelgard at max investment as well. So this is a plus 10 plus defense Fallen Edelgard with pretty much solo, attack defense ideal, and bonfire. On the left you have the same build I just showed, with Lukas basically stacking his attack and defense, and I've included the spurs 2 to all stats, which would indicate kind of Resplendent stats. But in reality, this ends up being much more favorable for Lukas, even if you give him 6 to all stats through just natural buffs like Tactics or Links, or more spurs, or even Flame. I haven't incorporated any of that into the sim. You can really swing this in Lukas's favor just by naturally giving him any buffs at all, just any buffs that you should be running on your team in general. And that also means you don't even have to merge him as much, because yeah, he ends up winning this, not easily. I mean, he does get hit pretty hard, because he's not going to end up killing her in one round. He actually does end up taking a bonfire from something like Fallen Edelgard, but he survives that. And I'm talking again, a maxed Edelgard. A plus defense maxed Edelgard doesn't kill him, despite bonfiring him and attacking twice. So if you wanted an enemy phase unit that could do it, Lukas does, just because he has insanely high defense. So you can do this, of course, with a lower merge Lukas for something like Arena Assault without even running no follow-up. It could be done with quick riposte. You do want some sort of guard effect though, or probably something like Flame, or just, of course, stacking him with more drives like defense and attack and whatnot to make sure that you do actually end up surviving and killing it. It does end up being more favorable by just giving him a little bit more support, but even without that support, he ends up winning. So it's just fun. This is something I like to do for fun. How do old units stack up against your modern units? Well, they can still work. You can make it work. It's not that bad. Lukas deserves this attention, and he maybe deserves your attention and investment if you like the guy, because I do. I unfortunately won't really find a use for him, because if I ended up using him, I would have to bench Ashnard, who I do prefer a little bit more than Lukas, and I'd have color overlap that isn't really that convenient, since I use Tiki quite a bit for my Far Saver, but I'm sure for some of you, Lukas could be just fine, and quite a good addition to maybe some strategies that you want to put together. If nothing else, maybe you at least enjoyed being enlightened by the potential of an older unit like this, and his min-max stats, and why they actually are pretty good even by today's standards. He kind of aged pretty well, and I wanted to give you guys that attention here before we call it a day in this video. So yeah guys, thank you for watching as always. As a last ask, thumbs up, so if you haven't already. I will see you guys in a very near video very soon. Love you all. Peace.
It's over.